when I was asked to moderate a panel entitled The Age of Kinetic Cyber Warfare at an event themed The Rise of the Machines, the sci-fi geek in me kind of got excited. But in all seriousness, this is a very important topic. Kinetic warfare was actually, I've only heard that phrase mentioned once today by James Scott earlier, but the congressman did touch on a few examples of it. It's no longer science fiction. It has been reality for a good 10 or 15 years already. In our pre-discussion that we had last week, we realized that there's a big flaw in this right now when we're talking about the importance of kinetic cyber warfare and all the different departments and customers and clients and organizations that are impacted by it, is that we're all speaking different languages for a lot of very common terms. So I think the first thing for us to do is kind of discuss some of the common terms that we use, as basic as IoT and IIoT, and cyber physical systems and things of that nature, just to make sure that we are speaking the same language, and maybe give some advice on to how we can continue to speak the same language between private sector, public sector, and academia. So, Don?
Yeah, so I'm not a bashful type, so D.Davidson out of the DoD CIO. Work on two efforts right now that are actually addressing this space. Inside the DoD, we break out our risk management framework into information systems and platform IT, those weapon systems. We may make some changes to that in the future because it really is about information systems and non-traditional information systems. Because when you think about the concept of operational technology, IT enables these things. Sometimes they're information systems, and we're worried about the confidentiality, integrity, availability of the data that flows. So where do I store it? How do I process it, analyze it, et cetera? On the other side of that equation, Venn diagram, is this world of operational technology, platform IT, where we expect the information to transfer into some sort of physical activity. And so that operational technology world is not very well understood, to be perfectly honest. So how do you have a discussion about what that means? Because most of those operators are all about availability. Does it work or doesn't it work? And they don't really understand the paradigm of integrity of the data, the confidentiality data. I would tell you that in many respects, the integrity of the data may be more important than the availability. Because if I change, as you heard in the Aurora example, if I change the information and actually can change the data and make it perform differently, it will eventually become non-operational or self-destructive in that arena.
And the difference between turn left and turn right can be hitting your enemy or hitting your friends. Knowing what IIoT means, though, what did we decide that was the definition of? The
industry Internet of Things.
Industry's Internet of Things, the industrial control systems that we're also interested in, because we want to make sure that what we need to happen happens when we need it to happen, and rather than getting wrapped around the axle about what all these acronyms really are, we need to have a consistent, simple set that we're talking about.
I think one of the things that's not only important about the definitions, but understanding the skills and abilities of those that come from different definitions. So my experience is that when application security, data security first was talked about, all the network security people had all the answers to that problem, which really were not effective. So those that are in the operational technology world have a set of skills and knowledges that affect that domain a little bit differently than those that have network security skills. And I think it's the blending of those and understanding those two environments that are different but similar. That's where we get the best ability to address these security issues in a timely and mission-oriented fashion.
Yep. And if I could, just wrapping up, I said two initiatives. One is inside DoD, the other one is outside DoD. So NIST leads a sub-working group under National Security Council now addressing the Internet of Things. So what's the agreed taxonomy? Where do we leverage the existing commercial standards that we have in that space? Where there isn't commercial language, commercial standards written, where do we need to engage so those standards development organizations can actually lay that foundation of commercial standards from that arena?
Yeah. So Greg, you touched on the point of bringing in different technologies and different groups. who in an organization or a company is responsible ultimately for ensuring Kinetic cyber safety? Because we are dealing with OT, IT, and physical processes. Is it the CEO, the CIO, the CISO? There's many people who you can point the finger at.
So I work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right? So in a military organization, it's very, very clear. It's the commander. So we have great chain of command, and I think that's one of the things that we need to work on is holding senior leaders accountable for cyber decisions, but that means they need to be informed, they need to understand the context to make those risk decisions. So right now I serve as the authorizing official for the Corps of Engineers, and I assume the risk. But what I always like to do is bring the commander in and say, this is what this means. I have the authority to make this decision, but you have to understand what that means for your execution of mission. So in a military organization, it's fairly straightforward. It's the mission and security. For a while there, I would tell you in my previous experience, it was mission and cyber was something to consider. I think now cyber is actually at some point equal with mission, because now we've realized that I can compromise the ability to execute the mission from a cyber viewpoint. So I think that's risen in importance, and educating leaders, CEOs. I mean, when Sony fires a senior official for a cyber incident, that brings that clarity of who's responsible. So I think today we've got to bring those senior leaders to be responsible for what they're either managing or not managing in the world of cyber.
I would say more that it's cyber is part of the mission, not that it's mission and cyber. We have a lot of people who have for years run their industrial control systems who've done what they do, and all of a sudden they bought a new device and now it's got an RJ45 connector on the back of it, or it's talking wirelessly. So as far as they're concerned, it's not an IT investment. It's still their industrial control system. So teaching them, helping them to realize that now they're part of not only mission support but IT support has been a big enabler for getting these things online and doing it more securely.
It's interesting that all three panelmen will come from a very structured group that's either a military or highly regulated arena. So our boundaries, our lines are pretty well defined in that arena. Having attended Black Hat and RSA, the discussion of where's your chief risk officer live? And then I've seen some corporate organizations move their CISO function more in line with the chief risk, or even aligned with the chief financial officer in some respects, as opposed to the CIO. I have always found that a little bit of a dilemma of the CIO and CISO living in the same office. I mean, the CIO is really about bringing as much IT to bear as I can to help the enterprise, and the CISO is trying to do that in a safe fashion. I know that we have found some resonance in the safety community. You would mention that one. I know when we look at identifying which parts are the most important to us in a given enterprise, we don't do that very well from a cybersecurity perspective right now in lots of organizations. So some parts are more important than others. We do that for flight critical safety. So we're actually looking at how we might identify those parts, if you would, in the configuration and management side and ops and sustainment, where you're just repairing parts or patching software. Where do you source that from? And then some parts are more important than others, so you might need codes to identify those.
Yeah. So my background is more the physical security of cybersecurity systems. So I'm very curious to hear your takes on where resources are being devoted to the physical, primarily the insider threats to cybersecurity systems versus the cyber attacks that are oftentimes outside attacks. Where are your organizations, where do you see the market putting time, putting money behind protecting your organizations and the others in this room?
Well, I'll just talk from a Corps of Engineer view. We've got to worry about both ends of that stick. I mean, we have one benefit of being out in the middle of nowhere a lot of places. So distance, physical security, simple things like locking doors, access. Those are basic, we talk about cyber hygiene. There's physical security hygiene that you've got to maintain too. A lot of places we are actually doing public recreation, or the public's interested in seeing a dam. So you've got that natural flow of really J&Q public that wants to be there. So you've got to be very disciplined just in the physical security assets. But as you all know, is that depending on how your system is architected, you are exposed to a wide waterfront or a shallow waterfront on closed restricted networks or internet connected resources. So you've got to defend based upon risk. And I think that's really good about the risk management framework is you get to make those trade-offs because there's not unlimited resources. So you've really got to manage all sort of areas of this to maintain and get to an acceptable risk. And that's sometimes balancing trade-offs in each of those areas.
And managing access, both logical and physical, has been a hallmark of IT systems going back to the mainframe days. So it's just been a logical progression. As we start moving into the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things, we now have smaller devices that go pretty much everywhere, and controlling physical access to them becomes a little bit more difficult, so we have to find unconventional ways of dealing with it. Do we want to lock it to the wall? Do we want to tie it down? And we're still working through a lot of those issues, but we're trying to apply the knowledge that we have to this new paradigm.
One of my favorite examples is I'm walking through Portland on the sidewalk, and there's these big containers that say SCADA systems cover on the sidewalk. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. No lock. It's just kind of, the little flip switch you have, and it would just literally, you just see these things every couple hundred feet on the sidewalk in general public.
So this is direct lead into actually one of the anecdotals that I often tell about smart buildings and where we go, because lots of the industrial control systems we have today, we face the challenge in aerospace and defense where we keep stuff far longer than its life expectancy. The same is true for infrastructure. I mean, so the buildings we buy, sometimes are retrofitted over time, but the elevators, the HVAC systems get replaced periodically over time. How much due diligence do you actually put into replacement parts and what I would consider sort of a dynamic build of materials, configuration management of where did you source that from, does it make a difference, et cetera. But to comment on that last piece, I often say that you would never think if I was building a secure building that I would take that control room that I have a padlock on or a keypad and put it on the sidewalk with a kiosk so people would just walk up and manipulate your air conditioning, your elevators, your door locks and stuff. But if you don't have secure access controls in place with hopefully multi-factor authentication, but at least not the default password in place in that world. Otherwise, people that are just walking by on the Wi-Fi are going to log into your system and control stuff.
And hopefully when you change that default password, it doesn't change back.
Right.
So in terms of building a whole new building from the ground up, it's pretty easy to design in a good security posture for the physical and the cyber systems in that building. But we live in a world that has evolved over time, so there's a lot of current risks. What's the low-hanging fruit that people can target now from a physical or cyber security standpoint?
I think one of the things we did in the Corps of Engineers, so I think was really brilliant, was prioritization of risk. Start with your critical infrastructure. I think in a lot of the research you'll see out by various organizations, there are many, many companies that do not even know their inventory of control systems that they possess. So they have no idea what their exposure is. So what we did is we prioritized critical infrastructure, supporting critical infrastructure, and non-critical infrastructure, and really focused on how to mitigate interim secure risk and then get the RMF certifications and kind of walk down in a priority order of categorization. And then really, inventory down to what level. I think that's very important too. So it's really, you got to get down to the sort of almost the PLC levels, the HMI interfaces, and really understand the complexity of that system to make the appropriate risk decision on what to attack in a cyber capabilities viewpoint. And that helps, there's a lot of, it's kind of hard to believe, but there's still a lot of sticker shock that companies are experiencing. We've had people say, well, what do you mean I've got to pay for cybersecurity? Isn't that already in there? And for a lot of places, that's kind of a new, what do you mean there's a recurring bill for cybersecurity? I've already paid for this control system. What do you mean I've got to, they kind of, one and done kind of sort of thing. So I think there's a again, back to that education piece about this is a continuous process. And as we've all seen in the IT world, it's continuous updates, it's continuous education, and it's continuous validation. And I think that mentality's got to migrate to, there's a continuous, smart building's got to be continuously maintained.
And we've been dealing with it a lot like we've been dealing with other shadow IT, trying to find out what's out there, go out and talk to the people who are using it, find out what their actual need is, how does it contribute to the mission, how can we characterize that risk. And then as we start talking more, they tell us, well, we bought this device is certified in this configuration. If I do what you're telling me to and put this patch on and change this setting, now it's no longer appropriately certified and I can't use it anymore, even though it provides less risk. We're not sure that it's going to do what we want it to do.
So when we started our cyber discipline effort in DoD in 2015, we have a multitude of scorecards now that stack up against that, but there are 4 major lines of effort. And I think they actually translate fairly well from the information systems over to the physical side. And that's the concept of access. So who has access to your systems and how do you control that? The next one is the attack surfaces, what is connected together that gives other people access or other machines access. Configuration management, and that's both for hardware and software. So how do you keep that dynamic bill of materials, that inventory of what you have, and is it securely patched and kept up to speed? And the last one is continuous diagnostics and monitoring. It's not just a network issue, but are you monitoring the behavior of the smart building? Is it doing the things you expect it to do? It's not just a network aspect, it's you have to monitor what's going on.
I think I'd throw people in there too at the end of that, because you get a turnover of a lot of people, and you've got to keep the individual apprised of what they're doing. And I don't know, my daughter will say, if I can do it, it must be legal. That's really scary. That's really scary. Well, Dad, if I can watch this movie on the internet, it must be legal. No. So we've got to really educate the workforce on what those implications are.
So I guess the big question,
and
though,
that's
is
non-attribution, by the way, please.
what is the future of kinetic cyber warfare? Is it another WannaCry accidental problem where now something that was targeting your desktops is accidentally hitting other systems that prevent physical care for people or cause damage to people? Or is it something a little bit more back into the realm of sci-fi and total world destruction, robots coming after us?
So the first one I'd hit is that Underwriter Labs took on an initiative for some standards. They're not quite where they need to be yet on certification of software that enable medical devices and industrial control systems. And so the whole concept behind how do you make sure something's secure? When it's a logic varying device and there's software behind it, that's probably a fundamental building block for how you're going to secure it in the future. And I think that's something we have to be conscious of moving on. That would sort of be the foot stomp I would make, is the fact that if it's logic varying, you need to probably look at the software and where you're sourcing.
I have this fear that my refrigerator and my elliptical are going to talk to each other and start making me work off what I've really eaten. But I think that
he took 2 donuts, make them another 20 minutes.
and increase the elevation.
Yeah.
I think that day may come. I don't think it's here yet. And I think if we are vigilant now, we can put that day off further into the future. But somewhere between a Stuxnet where a couple of targeted devices are destroyed to a WannaCry where, oops, we let it out and we did a lot more damage or a lot different damage than we thought we were going to do. And I think that's where the evolution's heading.
Yeah, I guess what I worry about is the sort of the glamour that every person can get by a singular attack. So it's kind of our, this is, I think our society very much is now influenceable by the actions of a single person. I think that's going to be the greatest conundrum, is how do you, we typically manage, sort of the macro threats very well. How do you worry about the one person that just wants to do a specific thing? That's, because again, your resources are where the threat generally is, but I think we get a lot of niche threats that are going to be very hard to manage, and and difficult. So again, I guess I took really affinity to the discussion about the harder you make IT and really OT, the more shadow IT you have. So there's some kind of curve there.
That's true.
If we make this super hard, you know, I always just say, you know, a broken computer in a locked room is secure, right? But it doesn't do anything. So if we make this very hard, people are going to find ways around it. So what's the balance of the right level of security with the right user experience that they'll oblige you by following the rules?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll foot stomp something that Greg said earlier twice. Number one, it's a risk-based process. Okay? It's never going to be 100%. It's going to be risk. And the other one is there's a people aspect, is the fact that we have to get past that paradigm of that's a cybersecurity problem, throw whatever offense to the cybersecurity experts. It's really everybody's space now. And we all live in an IT-enabled world, so we're all going to have to play a little piece of that security, otherwise we can't do it.
And making some mistakes so that the business processes come to light that, oops, this is what can happen, we need to really take this seriously, also plays into that.
Do you guys have any one dream immediate task that you'd like to see within your organizations to help mitigate this risk?
World peace. No, I actually, I don't think there's a silver bullet. I don't think there's a singular thing. It's a multitude.
It's a system solution.
There's definitely a general awareness. I would say that a lot of the briefings that I give on the supply chain risk management side of cybersecurity is just a general awareness. We are so enamored with IT, we expect this cost, schedule, performance triangle to balance, but most of us are enamored with cost and schedule. I want it fast and I want it cheap, and recognize you're going to pay penalties in performance and security and sustainability if you buy the fastest, cheapest thing you can get. So.
I guess I was talking to a couple of project engineers, and one said very logically, I'd like to use the tool I used in college to do my job. And then the person right next to him said, I'd like to use the tools I used in college to do the job. They went to college 30 years apart. So really, I would think that sort of, maybe it's a 10-ish bullets and probably not silver, but a knowledged user is I think your greatest asset for cybersecurity. So when they get that phishing email and they say, yeah, that's crazy, why would I click on this? Or when they get, you know, you read about it, you know, there's a poor, 97-year-old guy that got talked out of his life savings because somebody in Nigeria called him. I mean, if people were aware, that's your best defense, I think, is a knowledged user that is aware of the risks and the productivity issues and can, I think that would be, you know, 80% of your adherence to success. And they're not in this room, by the way, so that's the real trouble. It's the other million people that you all interact with that think cyber is your problem.
Just the fact that you're here listening today, you're curious and aware. If you're not an expert in the space, you're at least knowledgeable enough to know you should be learning something.
So a couple of months ago, I had a call from my mother who said, I got a call from Microsoft, and they were going to fix my computer. And I told him, no, you'll be here Sunday and you'll take care of it for me. So part of the message got through, and I'm glad as we keep working with people that those messages are getting through, and I think that is my dream, that people start thinking of things as, oh, this isn't my whatever, this is an internet-connected product that I need to worry about and think about, and oh, what data is going into it, and what data is coming out of it, and who really should have access to it, and am I doing the right thing by plugging this in? So that's my dream.
Okay. Well, I think our time is up, so thank you to the panelists for joining us here. Thank you all.
Thank you.